Welcome to South Sudan, everybody, the world's youngest country, like the newest member of the United Nations. They got their learner's permit for nationhood in 2011. The Wi-Fi is oil, and the argument is a tad more explosive. Let's explore the wonders, the challenges, and everything in between. Let's go. Now, you can't talk about South Sudan without mentioning the Dinka people. They're like the OG South Sudanese. Been there since way before it was cool, before it was even a country. We're talking centuries, people, centuries. They primarily live along the Nile River because who wouldn't want to live next to unlimited Nile water? It's like having a beachfront property, but instead of sandcastles, you build your house out of mud and sticks. Don't worry, we'll get to the housing situation later. The Dinka are all about tradition. We're talking agriculture, cattle herding, the classic living off the land kind of deal. And we've been doing it so successfully for so long, we make hipsters with backyard chickens look like total amateurs. But don't let the traditional lifestyle fool you. We are incredibly resilient, having survived centuries of everything from tribal wars to colonization to, well, the whole becoming a new country thing. Now, you know how everyone's always talking about Scandinavian people being tall? Well, the Dinka are like, hold my beer, or should I say my fermented milk. Seriously, these guys are giants. We're talking an average height of 1.82 meters for men. That's almost 6 feet tall. Imagine a basketball team made entirely of Dinka players. They wouldn't even need to jump to dunk. They could just gently place the ball in the hoop. Now, I'm not saying I'm intimidated or anything, but if I ever found myself in a limbo contest with a Dinka, I'd probably just hand them the trophy right then and there. No point in even trying. But hey, it's not just about height, right? It's about what you do with it. And the Dinka, they use their height to their advantage. They navigate the Nile, they herd their cattle, they look incredibly majestic in their traditional clothing. Basically, they're winning at life, and they're doing it all while towering over everyone else. Okay, we've established that the Dinka are tall, like really tall, but they're not just tall, they're also incredibly striking in their appearance. We're talking statuesque, folks, statuesque. They have this deep, dark skin that seems to absorb the sun itself, and long, lean limbs built for both grace and strength. Think of a gazelle crossed with a marathon runner crossed with, I don't know, maybe a really photogenic tree. Their features are often described as nilotic, which basically means they have high cheekbones, strong noses, and eyes that seem to hold centuries of wisdom. They're like the supermodels of the Nile Valley. Forget Fashion Week, we need Dinka Week, and let's not forget the hair. Dinka hairstyles are a whole other level of artistry. From intricate braids to elaborate headpieces, they're like walking sculptures, expressing their culture and identity through every carefully placed strand. Move over, Picasso, there's a new artist in town. Now, you might notice that some Dinka people have these intricate patterns etched onto their skin. No, they're not tattoos, they're actually a form of traditional scarification. Now, before you go, ouch, let me explain. Scarification is a deeply meaningful practice for the Dinka. It's a rite of passage, a way to mark important milestones in life, like coming of age or joining a particular clan. Each scar tells a story, represents a connection to their ancestors and their heritage. It's a permanent reminder of who they are and where they come from. Talk about wearing your heart on your sleeve. These guys are wearing their entire history on their skin. And the designs, don't even get me started on the designs. They're like ancient hieroglyphics, each one unique and full of symbolism. You could spend hours just trying to decipher the meaning behind each line and dot. It's like having a history book written on your body. How cool is that? So we've established that the Dinka people are pretty tall, like seriously tall. But you know what else is impressive? Their numbers. Imagine a group so large, it could practically be its own country. They make up a significant chunk of the population, like 18%. The Dinka are split into smaller groups called clans, each with its own way of doing things. It seems to work for them. Now, you might think that having all these independent clans would make things chaotic. Who settles disputes? Who makes the big decisions? Well, the Dinka have figured it all out. They have this system based on respect for elders and a strong sense of community. Each clan has its own leaders, usually the older folks who've earned respect. They mediate disputes, offer guidance, and keep things running smoothly. Think of them as the wise grandparents of the Dinka tribe. The Dinka have a strong sense of community spirit. They believe in helping each other out and looking out for one another. In a place like South Sudan, that sense of community is crucial. It's what allows them to thrive, even in the face of challenges. All right, folks, let's talk about language. Every culture has its own unique way of speaking, and the Dinka are no exception. They've got their own language, and let me tell you, it's a fascinating one. It's got these beautiful melodic tones and clicks that make it sound almost musical. It's like listening to a whole different kind of symphony. And just like their people, the Dinka language is part of a larger family. It's amazing how languages connect us, even across continents and cultures. Now, I'm going to level with you. I don't speak Dinka, but that doesn't mean we can't appreciate the importance of preserving languages like Dinka. Every time a language fades away, we lose a bit of human history and culture. It's like losing a library full of stories, songs, and knowledge. These languages are a window into different ways of thinking and connecting. Let's celebrate the power of language to connect us and make us laugh. All right, folks, buckle up because we're about to dive into some recent history. South Sudan is the world's youngest country, like the newest kid in school. After decades of struggle, South Sudan gained independence in 2011. Declaring independence was pure joy, but also the start of new challenges. It's like moving out of your parents' house for the first time. South Sudan, a newborn nation, eager to make its mark. But there were serious growing pains. Independence came at a steep price. Years of conflict left the country scarred. It's like building on a cracked foundation. Time, resources, and effort are needed. One of the biggest challenges, the economy. Heavily dependent on oil, a blessing and a curse. Pipelines ran through Sudan, causing disputes. Running a business with a difficult partner. Despite challenges, the people are resilient. I'm rooting for them every step of the way. So, South Sudan gets its independence, right? They're ready to be their own nation, but there's a catch. Oil pipelines. South Sudan sits on a lot of oil, but the pipelines run through Sudan to the ports. It's like sharing an apartment with your ex. Sudan uses this to squeeze South Sudan for transit fees. And when they don't get their way, they shut down the pipeline, halting South Sudan's economy. Now, you might think, well, why don't they just build their own pipelines? Pipelines are expensive, like really expensive. We're talking billions of dollars. And when you're a new country, finding that cash is like finding a unicorn. Even if they had the money, building pipelines takes years. Meanwhile, they're stuck relying on Sudan. It's a tough situation for developing nations. And let's not forget the environmental impact. Oil spills, pollution, all that fun stuff. The pursuit of black gold often comes at a cost. And in this case, it's a cost the people of South Sudan can ill afford. Okay, so we've talked about oil, but let's talk about the people who actually live in this young nation. See, South Sudan might be rich in resources, but the majority of its citizens are living in poverty. I'm talking real, grinding poverty, where most people are trying to survive on less than $1 a day. Now, imagine that for a second, $1. You can't even get a decent cup of coffee for that in most parts of the world, let alone feed a family, pay rent, and cover all the other essentials of life. But that's the reality for millions in South Sudan. They live in rural areas, often far removed from any major cities or towns. And when I say far removed, I mean it. We're talking dirt roads, limited transportation, and basically no access to basic services like healthcare, education, or even clean water and sanitation. It's a stark contrast to the image of a country brimming with oil wealth, isn't it? And it highlights the deep inequalities that exist within the nation. Now, you might think that living in such conditions would make people lose hope. But the people of South Sudan are resilient. They've faced conflict, famine, and displacement, yet they continue to strive for a better future. They rely on subsistence farming, growing what they can on small plots of land and often walk for miles to access water sources. Their livestock, mainly cattle, are not just a source of food, but also a symbol of wealth and status. But the lack of basic infrastructure and services makes life incredibly challenging. Imagine getting sick and having to walk for days to reach the nearest clinic, or having children who have to miss school because they're needed to help with chores or tend to the crops. It's a reality that's hard to fathom for those of us who take these things for granted. But despite these challenges, the spirit of the South Sudanese people remains unbroken. They hold on to the hope that one day their young nation will be able to translate its oil wealth into a brighter future for all. All right, so we've talked about the economic realities, the poverty, the lack of infrastructure. Now let's talk about something a little more, well, homey, because when you think of homes, you might picture fancy apartments, sprawling suburbs, maybe even a beach house or two. But in rural South Sudan, home is where the tukul is. Now, a tukul isn't your average suburban dwelling. It's a traditional house, circular in shape and made primarily from mud, sticks and thatch. Think of it as the original sustainable housing, built with locally sourced materials and designed to withstand the harsh climate. These tukuls are more than just houses. They're a testament to the resourcefulness and resilience of the South Sudanese people. They're built using traditional techniques passed down through generations, with each family contributing to the construction of their homes. It's a communal effort, a celebration of community spirit and self-reliance. And while they may not have all the modern amenities, they provide shelter, a sense of belonging, and a connection to their heritage. Now, don't get me wrong, living in a tukul isn't exactly glamorous. Space is limited, privacy is a luxury, and amenities are, well, basic. We're talking open fires for cooking, no running water, and definitely no Wi-Fi. But despite the simplicity, there's a certain beauty to it. The way the sunlight filters through the thatched roof, the earthy smell of the mud walls, the sound of laughter and conversation echoing from within. It's a reminder that home isn't about material possessions, but about the people you share it with, the memories you create, and the sense of community that surrounds you. And in that sense, the tukuls of South Sudan are a powerful symbol of home. They represent a way of life that's deeply connected to the land, to tradition, and to the enduring spirit of the South Sudanese people. They may be simple structures, but they hold within them a wealth of stories, traditions, and dreams for the future. All right, folks, let's talk about wealth in South Sudan. Forget Wall Street, forget Bitcoin. We're talking about good old-fashioned cattle. You see, in Dinka culture, wealth isn't measured in dollar bills, it's measured in muni. The more cows you have, the richer you are. It's like having your own personal stock market. But instead of stock options, you've got stock options with 4 legs and a serious moustache. And these aren't just any cows, people. We're talking prime, grass-fed, organic beef here. These cows are the real deal. They're like the Beyoncé of the bovine world. They're that impressive. So, if you're ever in South Sudan and you're looking to impress someone, don't flash your fancy watch or your expensive shoes. Just casually mention how many head of cattle you own. Trust me, it'll get you further than a first-class ticket on Emirates. Now let's talk about marriage in Dinka culture. Forget Tinder, forget Match.com, forget those awkward first dates. In South Sudan, it's all about the dowry. And the dowry is all about, you guessed it, cows. That's right, folks. If you want to marry the love of your life in Dinka culture, you better have a whole lot of moolah. And by moolah, I mean a whole lot of cows. We're talking dozens, sometimes even hundreds of cows. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's a lot of pressure on the cows. But hey, at least they're playing a vital role in bringing 2 people together. Plus, it's not like they have to pay for the wedding cake or anything. But seriously, the bride price is a big deal in Dinka culture. It's a sign of respect for the bride and her family, and it represents a significant investment in the future of the marriage. So next time you're complaining about the price of wedding rings, just remember it could be a whole lot worse. Okay, folks, it's time to get serious for a minute. We're going to talk about education in South Sudan, and unfortunately, it's not a pretty picture. Now, I know what you're thinking. Trevor, you're always joking. Surely the education system in South Sudan can't be that bad. Oh, but it is. It really, really is. You see, only about 16% of children in South Sudan even attend school. That's right, 16%. And out of that small percentage, only a tiny fraction actually complete primary school. We're talking less than 2%. These numbers are heartbreaking, folks. They paint a bleak picture of a country struggling to provide its children with the most basic human right, the right to an education. So why is the education system in South Sudan in such dire straits? Well, as you can imagine, there are a whole host of factors at play. First, you've got the obvious issue of poverty. Most families in South Sudan are simply too poor to afford school fees, uniforms and supplies. And even if they could, many schools lack basic resources like textbooks, desks, and even qualified teachers. Then there's the issue of conflict and instability. South Sudan has been ravaged by civil war for decades, and the education system has been one of its biggest casualties. Schools have been destroyed, teachers have fled, and children have been forced to become soldiers instead of students. And as if all that wasn't bad enough, there's also the issue of gender inequality. Girls in South Sudan are far less likely to attend school than boys, and those who do often face discrimination and harassment. Well, folks, that's it for our journey through South Sudan. We've covered a lot of ground, from the towering heights of the Dinka people to the devastating realities of poverty and conflict. We've seen the beauty of their traditions, the resilience of their spirit, and the challenges they face on a daily basis. It's been a wild ride, full of laughter, tears, and a whole lot of "did that really just happen?" moments. But most importantly, we've learned that South Sudan, despite its struggles, is a country full of hope. Hope for a brighter future, hope for peace, and hope for a day when all its children will have the opportunity to reach their full potential. Thanks for joining us on this incredible adventure. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insightful content from around the world. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay woke.